This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 138.
Put one or two slides in there. Even just send one slide home where you're just like, please put your comments or please put your feedback from the lesson today. I think just having the ability to see what it can do in a small way will give you the ability to want to continue building those lessons out.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Matt, the EdTech neighbor Rogers. Matt, your Twitter handle was right in the wheelhouse of our conversation tonight. How you doing, my man?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. This is coming out in mid-September, right in the heart of the beginning of the school year, but we are recording this over the summer, and I am absolutely just loving summer so far. We got out a little bit earlier than we normally do, and so July 4th seemed to take forever to get to in a good way, and we are getting ready to go away soon, and it seemed like I've had such a long summer prior to vacation, more than I'm used to, so it's nice.
I'll tell you, so my best friend lives in New Hampshire, and I had the idea of just driving up there for no good reason because I can. And so tomorrow I'm just leaving to just drive up and show up on his doorstep because I know he'll be home and he has nothing going on this weekend just because I can. And that right there is one of the major perks of just the matter of fact. Another anecdote. Again, this is coming out September where I'm probably like going crazy, but it was very enjoyable. I went for a bike ride this morning, and my thought was, all of these people are going to work right now, and I'm out here riding my bike. Life is very, very good, man.
It is. So when you're listening to this in the beginning of the school year,
Recognize we're not in the same mindset.
Take a deep breath and just know that every school year is a new journey and a positive journey. And so tonight we had on Amber Trout, and she is a fantastic educator, and she now works for PearDeck, which she will introduce later as well. And so I talked about this in the show, but I just want to reference here as well. We had good quality conversation like we always do, I feel, and we talked a lot about instruction, but we focused it around a technology tool. And I'm really glad we decided to do this, Matt, because I thought it was awesome.
I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that we hope, Ken, in your current role, and really through this podcast, is we share our values, our educational and really human values every single week. And we've tried a lot of options trying to figure out a really great one. And fortunate for us, there are lots of really great ones out there. But that being said, if you're looking for something that, this kind of gets our stamp of approval, this is a fantastic tool with features that really bring to life a lot of the strategies we talk about wanting to have in our classroom, naturally including every student in the classroom, giving every student a voice, the idea of having interactivity and changing up the flow of lessons and being more in control because you actually break from traditional learning. So PearDeck is a tool that we are hugely supportive, and mainly because it works with everything you're probably already using. It runs as a Google add-on. They got rid of, maybe not got rid of, but they went full tilt and said, we're going to meet you where you live as opposed to come to my house. And that is the strongest feature single-handedly of PearDeck compared to realistically every ed tech tool, because everyone wants you to go to their website, their program, their app, and your stuff doesn't live there. So I am a huge supporter of PearDeck. My wife, who when I first really found it out, and once they added the Google add-on, I I signed her up and just forced her to use it, because it was one of those things that I'm like, oh, that's a no-brainer. It's the same thing we've said about Facebook, communicating with families on Facebook, a place where they're already living. This is not quite the same thing, but a huge value for, 90 some percent. This is just a guess, probably higher than 90% of teachers at this point are creating visual materials for class, probably on Google Sites at this point, or Google Slides. And to add interactivity, it's just an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like you said, Matt, for what it's worth, this tool does have our stamp of approval. And, we hope to do a few of these. We're just going to talk. We want to bring some tools to our audience that they may or may not be aware of, to hopefully enlighten them a little bit more, and add a little bit of professional development into the show. So I don't want to delay any further, and let's bring in really the expert and a great conversation with Amber Trout after we hear from Teach Better.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcast. Now let's get back to the episode.
Hi, Amber. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. We are super excited to kick off this conversation with you. And it's going to be a little bit different as we progress through the conversation, which I'll share a little bit later for our audience. But to start things off, just please officially introduce yourself. Let us know where you're coming from and give us a background of what your career in education has looked like.
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Amber Trout, and I am the advocacy manager at PearDeck. And I was a former educator for 11 years prior. I was a Colorado native. That's where I did 11 years of my teaching, and now I currently live in Florida. But I was definitely in a lot of different realms in the teaching world. When I started, it was 3 through 5. I did elementary students. And then I moved into a STEM computer coding role where I taught K through 5 computer coding with a program called Project Lead the Way. And then I moved into instructional coaching, where I did one-to-one laptop initiatives with teachers in a school that had just got laptops, and it was a middle school. I also ran an online digital academy for students that weren't able to take certain different courses and classes that they could do online. And then I also got my principal license, and I was moving into administration before I moved into working with PearDeck. I'm coming up on 3 years working with PearDeck, but I do work with educators really closely in my role currently. And I have a love for working with teachers and students, and just doing it in a different, wider way now.
That's amazing. And you have a really solid and vast background, which I find interesting. So you moved into a STEM position, like you said, and then into an instructional coach position, which was, it seems like one of your main purposes was the transition into a one-to-one environment for teachers. So are you a big video gamer, or did you build computers in your basement as a kid?
I wish I could say that, but no.
And the reason I asked that is because I had a somewhat similar path. I taught elementary STEM. Matt and I were a part of a program called STEM Camp EDU. It was a professional development event for teachers. I didn't even play video games by myself. I only ever played when I was around friends, and it was like what the social activity was. I don't build computers. I don't consider myself techie at all. And I know Matt is the same. And I kind of made the same assumption about you. So what was it about being just a great elementary teacher that pushed you into this world that is so technology heavy and coding? And I never coded before I did any of this. What was it about that drove you in that direction, to leave your classroom for that, your self-contained classroom?
So I guess in a sense, I was quote unquote techie, but it was in a different kind of format. It's not like I was doing super intense things when I was an elementary school teacher. But what I started with when I first started, well, it's 13 years ago. I did it for 11 years, and now I've been with PearDeck for a while. So 13 years ago, when I started as a teacher, it was like we didn't have all that technology, but I was realizing that the more that you could do things on technology, the easier it was for the students, the easier it was for you. You're not making copies. You're not over here using your vis-a-vis markers. Yes, I was in the times of those. And so there was all these things that I was realizing that were taking me so long and was taking me so much time, and I was recreating them every year. And I'm like, this is too much. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start building PowerPoints for all of my vocabulary words. And I'm going to make sure that those things can be used year after year. I was like, I'm going to start building out, blended learning experiences for students to be able to engage in content online instead of just on paper and pencil. And so I started thinking about these things back when people weren't really thinking about that so much. And so I became known as the tech lady in my school. And so everyone would come to me and say, how do you do this? How does this work? And so I was kind of doing it just as something I liked, and it was like making my life easier. But then I started realizing I was actually kind of good at it. And so that's how I got the role in becoming a STEM teacher and doing K-5 computer coding. I was called a technology interventionist. Like, what does that even mean when you get it? But that's what I was. And it was like, okay, I'm going to teach teachers how to use their technology. It started out with like, let me teach you how to use all your devices. It was a STEM school, which had computers, iPads, Apple TVs. I mean, every teacher had multiple devices and they didn't know what to do with them. And I was like, well, I can do this. So I taught everyone how to use their devices, which then turned into, well, you're good with this. Why don't you start teaching STEM computer coding classes? Okay. Why don't you teach after school groups for engineering? All right. Why don't you go to these different conferences and learn all about it? Perfect. Let's do it. And so I just really got like a passion for it when I was doing STEM. And then when I moved into this other school where I was able to do more one-to-one implementation, blended learning, flipped classrooms, I was like loving it. Like that was my favorite thing to do, is like, how can we make things in your classroom easier and more accessible to students? And so my journey of like figuring out what worked in a classroom and how we could do it with technology just really like blew up. And the school that I was in prior to moving to PearDeck actually used PearDeck. We had it at my school, and I was really interested in it and playing around with it all the time. And I'm like, this is kind of a cool little tool, So I think it progressed. It started from PowerPoints, which we all know are very mundane, all the way up to engineering is elementary after school groups and 3D printers. I'm like, oh, okay, let's roll with it.
Well, and I think we can kind of echo a similar background where it was just kind of like I have mentioned on the show before. I felt like I came into education. Now this will be year 15, but I came in 15 years ago, and I was seen as the one that knew technology, and I didn't have any prep in technology, but we had just had smart boards, thrown in classrooms. And so what I didn't understand in necessarily pedagogy or curriculum knowledge quite yet, I did have in technology. And I felt like I was exchanging that skill. Like, for everything that I come to bother you with, I promise I'll leave you with one thing. And similar, and you may feel this way as well, like I found my love for the use of technology strictly around efficiency for a long time, right? Like, so the idea, I lived off this perspective because 8 years ago I thought it was good teaching practice to go paperless. Like, that's my goal, which is really funny when you're like, that doesn't actually change. It's that's an adult goal, that's a teacher goal necessarily, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the students. So I think in that realm, and then obviously like Project Lead the Way, which we're both familiar with, and some of these other features that you're just kind of like, if I've already had this snowball going, I might as well just add one other feature. I guess in that realm, in those positions, you did that as a pioneer. And so some of those features feel like you have to vet out a ton of materials. What is some of that process when you're looking through and really evaluating something in your many different roles? We'll even consider, pre-PearDeck, that you're like, this is what makes a good tool that you want to bring to your coworkers, and this is something that just feels like it's going to be more hassle than worth?
I think it always came down to ease of use for me. You did not want to have to spend multiple hours and trying to figure out little nuances. It was like, how can I make something that's going to make your life easy? It's going to be efficient and it's going to be user friendly. And so I think that that was always what I was looking for. And I mean, and it took many times of me. I was like, I'm very much an innovator and a learner and a grower, and I continue to look for the next opportunity, even though I don't maybe need to. But that's just how I was. And so I would spend time like building out my own, Google like websites and figuring out, is this the best way to do it? Or I would do these online, virtual field trips and figuring out what's the best way to do that. And so I would play with it myself, but I would use those teachers that were excited about technology and say, can I come into your classroom and just like test this out with your kids and see what, it feels like? But I was always thinking about what is the best way? What is the ease of use? Because there was so many times you would have teachers that are so reluctant to use technology, or were veteran teachers that were like, I just don't have the ability to want to have to build that out. So I was like, let me show you how easy it is. And I think that that's kind of transpired into now PearDeck, because I train PearDeck in a whole different way than maybe we do as a company, because I feel like teachers need to know the foundations of a product first and how easy it is to use before you move into the, let me show you that you can build this all out. It's like, let me just give you what you already have and just add some interactivity to it. You have pre-existing slides, everyone does. Let's move forward with it. So I think figuring out what teachers are comfortable with, the ease of use of something, and then being able to slide in with, here, it's going to make your life a whole lot more,
Well,
engaging and seamless.
and Ken, you can feel free to chime in too. Like, I feel like current technology, it does feel, I think one of the challenges in ed tech and a lot of these is there is no silo that a lot of these tools exclusively have features of. Like, an LMS has features that overlap in some capacity. So today those waters are muddy, but they're all substantially easier to use. Whereas, when I was first introduced to PearDeck, it was exclusive in my perspective. Like, it was the unicorn in the room, but it was I could superpower something that I already have. And so that was the attractive feature. So I guess, like, that is the ease of use was a like massive thing, because we were going around pitching to people the idea of using technology, and boy, oh boy, are things different, that it's second nature now for lots of different reasons. And so now it's, what your comfort zone is, what is your intended purpose, and, keeping up with what features and changes, come on to make these multifaceted super tools.
Yeah. And do you remember the days of like having to get into an Adobe and look at it with all of the things in the sidebar and thinking, I will never be able to figure this out?
Absolutely.
That's what I feel like it was like at the beginning when you're using technology. It was like, there's all these buttons and you don't know what to do, but I wasn't afraid to push the buttons. I'm like, well, I'm just going to figure it out. But there's a lot of people that's daunting too. And so how can you make that feel less daunting in a way that's still going to make your classroom,
such
seamless?
a silly thing, but like the idea of a sandbox was something that blew my mind, that like you could make a demo that if it crashes and burns in front of you, it means nothing. A kid will never see that. But that gave me a lot of permission in the realm of trying technology and feeling like you can kind of play around and see where it is. And like, I remember, this is again, like the idea of a WYSIWYG, like what you see is what you get integration of a website. Like, I made my own website through Google Sites or Wix or Weebly. Like, it was astonishing, although it's so obvious and normal what feels like 4 or 5 years later. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had not a lot, but we've had some conversations on technology integration and how and where and why. And you're hitting on a couple big pieces, Amber, like you said, of what initially drove you there. It was efficiency, it was engagement. It was very similar for me. I like the problem solving aspect of it, not only my own problem solving, figuring things out, like you've mentioned, but also giving the students opportunities to do that. And so where we want to steer this conversation is really talking a lot about PearDeck. And so this is new for our show. I think it, Matt, kind of stemmed from the success of our summer PD series, where we would bring back guests, and Amber, we would focus on topics like empowering struggling students or restorative practices or different things where we brought guests back and we really hyper focused on one specific topic. And so we want to do a little bit of that with technology integration and ed tech tools that are out there. And Matt and I both love PearDeck. We're not gonna invite someone. We're not gonna invite someone on that supports a product that we've never heard of or that we don't feel is beneficial to quality instruction. And that is what has always drove me towards PearDeck initially, and why it's still something that I use when I can or when it's available. And so I would love for you to just start off by introducing our audience who potentially has never heard of PearDeck. How do you summarize PearDeck? You're the expert, so give us the elevator pitch.
You got it. So it's definitely your engagement tool. So it can be added to your pre-existing Google Slides or PowerPoint online presentations, and it can now turn your slides into something interactive for students to be able to respond in real time. So no longer are the days of just students staring at a slide and you're hoping that they're taking in the information. You're going to be able to have them drawing, typing, being able to navigate on a website, all within the PearDeck experience. So it makes it so that even if students are in the classroom or if they're at home, they're going to have the opportunity to participate in real time. So it makes it so much nicer for an educator because they're not having to call on that one or two students that are raising their hand. You have 100% student engagement because you have every student's response coming in through the PearDeck presentation. So, and then just another thing is when the students are looking at theirs, they only have their responses. They're not going to see other students' responses. So it makes every student feel comfortable because the screen that they would see projected up on the screen or on the classroom whiteboard would literally be anonymous. So there would be nobody's name attached to an answer, which we feel is really great for students to feel confident and comfortable putting an answer that maybe they don't know, but they're willing to give it a try when their name's not attached to it. So all very in real time.
Yes, absolutely. So let's go with a scenario where you can maybe paint the picture a little bit more, because you talked about how you love to start with teachers that already have things. Let me just enhance it a little bit. That's all that we're going to look at today. So I am a secondary math teacher, and I have a 15-slide Google slide presentation that is reviewing a unit because we have a test coming up in a couple days. So I have some vocabulary terms, I have some vocabulary slides, and I have some practice problems on there. So how can I enhance that with live interaction with PearDeck?
Well, there's a couple of ways. So first, in the PearDeck add-on, so in Google Slides, it's called the add-on in there. It's under the extensions menu. In PowerPoint Online, it's going to be in the add-ins menu. Once you do open that up and have it installed, you're going to see a sidebar inside of there where you have access to pre-made templates, one of them being math, that you can pull those right in, and it's going to take you less than a couple of seconds to put them into your pre-existing slides, or to transform your lesson by using the 6 different interactive question types that you can now add to it. So obviously, putting drawing in there would be a great way for students to be able to show their thinking when they're being able to build out a math problem. We also have a website slide where you can embed other websites like Desmo calculators, things like that, where you want students to be able to interact and be able to use scientific calculators if that's the case. And then you also have the ability to have text, which is a great way for students to be able to respond with text if it's a number problem, if they're trying to tell you and show you their thinking. Those are all different opportunities for students to engage. And shameless plug, we have another little tool. It's free and it's called Flashcard Factory. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but sometimes people are not familiar about it. It's actually a way for you to do math as well. We've seen teachers innovate with it where they, instead of putting the term as the word and then a definition for the vocabulary, they'd put the problem and then the students have to respond with text telling them how they work that out or they would respond with a picture, drawing an array or drawing the problem out. So there is some other opportunities to not only engage within the PearDeck, but also within our PearDeck product called Flashcard Factory. So few
That's
different
awesome.
ways.
I was not
And
familiar with the flashcard factory. Matt, I will let you jump in. I just want to interject with one thing.
that's totally fine.
When I run professional development and I'm in a situation where I know I'm going to say more than I can show. I like to always say to teachers, I have screencasts and things prepared for you to look at afterwards. Let me give you all the hows and whys. So before we go any further, if our listeners are thinking, how am I going to do this, or where can I follow along? Is there a spot where they can go to kind of like do the Google add-on and get some of the basic tutorials that we can reference now and we'll reference again at the end?
Absolutely. PearDeck.com, training and resources. There's going to be a place for you to be able to look at any pre-existing content in there, any webinars, and getting started with PearDeck. So definitely go to the training resources on PearDeck.com.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Sorry, Matt.
No, you're totally fine. I think I just want to, as a customer review portion, I think one of the things that you mentioned that I want to highlight again is that sells the product by all means is you said your love of technology came from ease of use. And I think what you mentioned really comes down to the Google add-on is so critical because a lot of the programs that have maybe mimicking features to PearDeck have their own environment by which a lot of them you're building within their ecosystem. So you're purposely building. I don't know about naming, said other companies, but like I know that my district paid for premium and then that was taken away. And, are we going to lose all the content we built? Very similar, I'll use to like Smart Notebook that we built all these slides in. The moment you don't pay for that, it becomes pretty useless. So at the minimum, what I found was it was beautiful that what so many educators were already using to build their materials, Google Docs, Google Slides, I guess Slides specifically, was the environment that the integration of PearDeck, like you didn't I didn't find myself needing to go to PearDeck. I just utilized the PearDeck add-on. And I found that going back to your, selling point as a teacher of ease of use, it's already in our wheelhouse that it adds on as literally an additional slide that once you joined the group code, what have you, you're rolling like you would a slideshow. It's just, it has other features to it.
You hit the nail on the head, Matt, honestly, because that is some of the things that we hear. And like, before when I was an educator, it was like, I have to build it here. I have to download it. I have to upload it. And it's like all these additional steps. And it's like, okay, that's like not what somebody wants to do. And who has time for that? And so you already have a Google Slides presentation that you're working with. Why not be able to pull up something where you can just now insert all of your interactivity in there? And so we were very intentional with that to make sure that that was an integration within the Google ecosystem. We partner with Google. Not only do we partner with Google within their Google Slides, we partner with them with their Be Internet Awesome curriculum powered by PearDeck as well. And so we do a lot of integrations with them to make sure that our system is working seamlessly with the Google ecosystem, which 90% of educators are using at this time. So that ease of use, that being able to just add it to what you already have. And also to your point, Matt, they do sometimes in these companies have a paywall that after you no longer pay for it, you no longer get to keep the content because it's in their ecosystem. Since it's in your drive, you get to keep all of that content. We never lock down any of the content that a teacher creates with PearDeck, even after they no longer have premium access. So that's something to note as well. It stays in your drive. We never take that out.
And you mentioned it's with Microsoft now as well.
Yeah, it's always been with Microsoft. It's just we have a high, user base with Google, and it's not as high with Microsoft. But yeah, it's exactly the same. It's going to stay in your SharePoint. Same thing.
I think it's a good time to kind of ask this question because it's been a little bit. We're recording this in the summer, and my summer brain is in full-fledged mode. Especially, I just got back from ISTE, so I have a ton of things in that realm. With that being said, can you kind of speak to the difference between the Google add-on, essentially free version, compared to what you're getting? I believe, again, you would know way better than I would, that there are question types or some other added features. What would be the incentive of going maybe to premium as opposed to the baseline? Or do you guys encourage, hey, get your feet wet with the free version, and if you really love it, then expand into the premium?
Yeah, the one thing that is the really biggest thing that you get with the premium version is you get the teacher dashboard. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with what the teacher dashboard is, but basically that's the teacher side that you're going to see all students' responses, you're going to see everything and be able to have that to come back to later. On the free version, the teacher dashboard would not be there. So you would be able to present live lessons, you'd be able to add that interactivity, but you wouldn't be able to see responses on the teacher side as far as seeing the names of students, being able to respond with feedback, being able to add a co-teacher in the teacher dashboard. So that's going to be a premium feature that most teachers find value in because they have access to seeing things in the background. But with the free version, you wouldn't have that. You would just be able to present live lessons. And then there's only 2 question types that are going to be premium, which will be drawing and draggables. And those would be ones that you wouldn't get access with the free version. But really, anything else that you want to do to present like a live lesson, you could absolutely do with the free version.
Can you clarify, like, one of my other favorite tools is quizzes, which is more of a instructional, like, I don't know, summative assessment in some capacity. There are creative ways. What are some of the differences that you feel like, my opinion is, I feel like PearDeck is more instruction, whereas quizzes is more assessment based. But what is the distinction that you would say, and you could even go the other realm of, like, what keeps PearDeck from being an LMS where, like, you house everything and then keep it away from completely summative?
Yeah. So basically, PearDeck is that real-time formative assessment. So you're going to be able to see things that are happening in real time, going to be able to fix misconceptions and be able to see things that are happening within the classroom environment right then and there. So we do call it a formative assessment tool because that's what you're being able to do with the content that you get to see there. As far as a like standards aligned questions and standards aligned content, we leave that up to the educators. We leave that up to you because that is going to be something that you would be pulling or be specific to a certain school or district. And so we try to stay out of that realm in the sense of we're not giving you standards aligned content. We're giving you content that you're going to be able to build into that for whatever the needs of your classroom are. We realize that kind of putting people in a box was not doing us a favor. It was like these teachers want to be able to build it the way that they want to build it. So every single one of our templates is completely editable, right down to the background color and the graphics. And anything that you want to be able to make, we just give you a template for it, give you some ideas to start off, and you build it into that standard aligned content that you want. So that's kind of what differentiates us when it comes to like assessment, as far as, a formative assessment tool that we're engaging you with. It looks a little different in that manner.
Well, and Ken, feel free to chime in. I don't know. That is such a triggering thing that you just said, not about PearDeck, but and I'm not sure if, like, I'm okay to say Nearpod was something that we had. And Ken, I don't know if it ever affected you, but it drove me crazy that, like, on the text slides that you're building in Nearpod, you'd have a title and a set, like, there was like 2 templates that you could ever use to put text into Nearpod, and for some reason the fact that was not editable drove me absolutely nuts. So that is another selling point, that like you're saying, the editable feature, we are control freaks. We all understand as educators that we want things to look exactly and easily how we want them to look. So having that flexibility is a huge selling point.
Yeah, I would say that I was a unicorn in the sense that doesn't bother me, but it bothered every single person I would ever talk to about it. So I do agree that
Yep.
I don't think it's, from a quality of instruction or a learning standpoint,
doesn't change anything,
matters at all. But for a teacher's sanity, it is essential in being available. So I do think it's important that PearDeck offers that. So when I first started using it, when it was presented to me, it was probably the typical format of, you have, like you said, you have a set of presentation slides, you add some interactivity. Now your classroom of 30 students, you're getting them engaged and you're getting feedback from them. And I totally agree that that is an easy way to enhance. It is an easy way to hold students accountable. It's such a simple thing that we really should be doing because it's enhancing basic direct instruction. That is not how I typically taught. I taught almost everything through small group. And when I started to reflect on it, I started to use it in my small group lessons. And I only had 5 or 6 students. And what I found is that it thoroughly enhanced my use of wait time. So my use of wait time, I would put on my top 5 teaching talents that I have. I'm really good at using wait time, especially with adults, because it drives them nuts. But it is,
oh, yeah.
It is, and I
so is Ken though. So
exactly.
okay.
So I thrive in that, and I even taught my students because they would, when we were in small group or teaching a whole class, and there's 6 kids raising their hand, but especially in small group, there would be a kid raising their hand, and I'm just sitting there staring at all the kids, waiting, and the one would be like, "Mr. Ehrman, like my hand is up. Why aren't you calling on me?" So, "Oh, I'm using wait time," and I would actually teach my students what wait time was, so they knew and they realized like, oh, he's going to sit here and wait until we all have an answer to offer. And so when I started using PearDeck and that interactivity in my small group lesson, it enhanced my use of wait time because now the student that was typically raising their hand first could respond first with a multiple choice or a draw or a type, whatever it was. And then they could just sit there and wait, right? And the other students had the time to process, to read it, to look at the picture, to type there was whatever that processing time they needed was, they had that time. And it was better than not having it because sometimes the kid that was first raising their hand, by the time my wait time was up, they forgot why they were raising their hand because they had become distracted or they were waiting too long. And so I found it to be extremely effective just in small group. So
I have some other knowledge bombs to
please,
hit you with on
please.
2
All
points
right.
there with PearDeck. So PearDeck also has something called student pace mode. And so I found that really useful for exactly that, for wait time, because sometimes students just need a little more processing time and they get a little flustered when you're pushing them forward and they're like, "Hi, I don't have enough time." And so I would turn it into student pace mode and I'd say, "Okay, you can stay there and continue working on that problem. The rest of the class is going to move forward. Let's go to the next slide." And so that student pace mode really gave the students the ability to say, "Okay, I'm not being forced. I'm not being like flustered. I can stay here for a little bit longer, get my work done, and then the rest of the class can continue moving on to the student pace mode." Because if you're ripping them away with the instructor pace mode where they no longer can work there, then it's kind of daunting to them. So I really utilize the student pace mode function for that because you can switch between those modes in the middle of a live lesson. So you want to do some, instructor pace mode where you're pushing kids together through the slides, or you can let them loose and be able to do independent practice with their work on their own. So that's a really great way to utilize it.
And like you said, the switch in the middle is really a nice feature because a typical lesson format is start together and then at some point you're transitioning into independent work. So being able to have it all built in one spot makes it nice because that slide or that activity is one whole lesson, but you can transition it when the moment is right.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing, when you talked about small groups, like my brain is, this is the teacher in me. And so when you talked about small groups, I was also realizing that there is other things that you can do in PearDeck called the website slide, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. But you have the ability to put in other Google documents in there. So you can put a shared Google Doc, a shared Google Slides, a Google form inside of the PearDeck experience. So kids are not jumping out to all different tabs and getting lost on the internet. So it's a nice way for you to be able to even do collaborative small group projects. Like, okay, here's a set of collaborative slides, put your name on each slide. Let's go ahead and work through this. And so you also have that opportunity to embed Google tools within the PearDeck experience. So you can still have that kind of collaboration small group through PearDeck.
Can I ask a quick question? Similar, but one of the things that I enjoyed, and I guess it's just clarification, say you have a web resource or maybe you have something you want the kids to work on. And so you're doing it housed in PearDeck, which is really nice that you're kind of controlling that. You want them to read this article from wherever the case may be. So you give all of those kids the article through PearDeck, do they have the ability to click on tabs and go away? Because one of the hard parts that we often find is if I just airdrop a link or whatever, they like email kids or use my learning management system, they may initially open, but then they're tapping over or they're clicking on a few buttons and they're nowhere close to the article I sent them. Is it one of those things that they are locked into what you sent, or it's just a vessel that, you would move on or away from if you needed to?
Well, we're not trying to solve all the world's problems.
Totally
today,
understand.
Matt, but
Totally
I'm
understand.
going to give you, no, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just going to say that it is an opportunity for them to go to that website. But if they were to click on the actual link and pop it out to a new
Got it.
tab, then yes, they would be able to go somewhere else and be able to look at their stuff. But I mean, that's the way of the world with kids,
Totally.
right? It's like, okay, how can you tell them to do something and stay in one place?
But they don't have
to your
to click
point,
on
there
that
is
to go to the website. They can
don't.
use the entire
Yeah.
website staying in PearDeck. And so when you go to the
Correct.
next slide, they move away from that website unless you, like you said, they clicked it out.
Which is huge.
That's what I was just going to say. Exactly. As soon as you move them off the slide, they no longer have access to it. So if they're smart enough and they know to like click on the bottom and click the tab out, then yeah, that would be something that they could do. But other than that, no, they wouldn't be able to do that. But also with websites and having them in the experience, it makes it a whole lot easier for you to be able to have students not being able to navigate all those places. Because like you said, as soon as you're like, okay, we're done, moving off to the next slide. So really great opportunity.
So what would you say for teachers listening that are comfortable learning technology, like the technology integration, the use of new tools isn't so much a challenge for them, but they're just not familiar with PearDeck? What would be, aside from just enhancing a basic presentation, what would you say is another reason that they should consider checking out PearDeck as a possible technology tool to integrate into their classroom?
I like to call it the ultimate app smashing tool because not only are you going to be able to have the engagement in there where students are drawing, they're typing, you can do brain breaks, social emotional learning, but you also have that ability to put those websites in there. So things like YouTube videos, flips, Padlets, anything in there that you want them to be able to do that you would essentially put into a learning management system and give them multiple links to click on, you're keeping that all within one experience. So now it's like, here's one PearDeck link. Let's go through this together. Let me turn it into student pace mode so you can do it for homework tonight. And we also have something called immersive reader, so they can take it home and be able to accommodate for themselves even after school hours, or with parents who maybe are not speaking, let's say, the same language at home or need accommodations with the work. So now you're being able to have 100% student accessibility in school and outside of school using the PearDeck platform.
I don't want to switch the conversation too much, but I have a general question that I often wonder. As first off, I think it's fantastic because you're coming into a position helping teachers with a basis of knowledge of how it feels emotionally, physically to be a teacher and what is needed, as opposed to sometimes when we educators are being pitched ideas by non-educators, that inauthenticity is really difficult. So 2 questions. What are some of those features that you feel like in your current role I guess I'll start with this one, allow you as a superpower to really support teachers in a role, even though you're not in the classroom every day?
It's just like what you said, it's the relevancy. It's I've lived it, I've done it, I understand it. And there's things that I think that you don't realize if you're not an educator. Like, you don't realize that kids spend all their time going to all these different websites and you're trying to figure out how to navigate them back. They would just think like, oh, give them a link, they're going to go there. And I'm like, that's the least of my worries. Like, they're on YouTube videos they're not supposed to be on. They're looking at documents that they're not supposed to be on, And so with the ability to understand like the little nuances that you might have as a classroom teacher, or the things that you have seen with students and the way that you manage the classroom, I think makes a difference, because not only can I relate to you, but I can empathize with you. It's like, oh, you've just wasted all this time trying to get kids back to where they need to be. And so also with the PearDeck experience, it has timers and it has lock screens in there. So now you can click the lock button and make sure kids are no longer navigating. You can, set timers so that you are taking back the instructional time and you're not having to wait for students. Or I used to work with kindergarten kids, and to ever have a kid type a full-on code on their screen in a kindergarten is like pulling teeth, because they literally don't know what a J is, they don't know what a G is, they can't figure out where to find it. And so being able to just give them a link to click and go makes it a whole lot easier. And so I think it's just having that knowledge, have lived that, being able to see what, and empathize with educators, it does make a difference. And I realize that in my role, like I sat in many professional developments where people came in as just sellers of the product. And I always say, I'm not a seller of the product. I don't even know that much about the sales side. I just spend the time telling people how this is going to help you in your classroom, because I know what it looked like when I used it in my classroom. So it does give you that ability to give people a better sense of understanding of the tool, and not just let me sell you something. Because in all honesty, I'm not getting any perks from selling anything because I don't know anything about it.
Well, and if you're willing to open up to it, I think, what was your decision to leave the classroom and leave the educational environment? Because I think a lot of us have people come in and pitch us ideas and tell us, oh, I was a 25-year teacher and I fell in love with this product. Or, what was that experience to transition? Because sometimes I think we have all experienced PD that have been great. There are some that you're like, I can't believe that that's the person they sent to run my professional development, representing this massive contract our school district is selling. Only if you're comfortable, like, was it based on a belief in this product and you really stepped into it? Or was it just looking for something different and this is something that hit a lot of the boxes for you?
So believe it or not, the school that I was at and the place that I was working prior to working for PearDeck, I loved it. I loved where I was. I loved the teachers I worked with. I loved the opportunity it was a school where I was actually making more money than I was like at my other school district. It was like a very nice, really great place, and I loved it. But I realized that my talents could be bigger than this small school in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And so I realized that I had talents that I wanted to be able to showcase with a wider audience, is what it was. And so it wasn't so much like, let me find this product and I just love them so much. Like, yeah, I liked PearDeck and I thought it was really great when I saw it and I used it. But it was kind of like, I actually even just fell into this position. Like, I wasn't specifically looking for PearDeck. I was just looking for an opportunity to be able to share my knowledge of technology and the relevancy that I had as an educator for a wider audience than a very small school in Colorado. Because, sometimes you feel like, okay, I think I'm being underutilized with the things that I can do, and I want to be able to showcase that more. And so that's kind of what it came down to, was like, I started realizing when people would talk with me, like, you know a lot, or you have really good ideas, or you're really innovative. And I'm like, maybe I am. So I started looking into to technology roles, because I thought, yeah, this is like fun. I enjoy this. And as you can see, like, I have a passion for wanting to teach teachers about things that make their classrooms easier, not just my product in general. I mean, I could do this with any product that I find is going to help out a teacher in their classroom. But it was kind of something where I just saw a bigger opportunity, and it gave me the venue to do that through EdTech.
So realistically, for teachers interested in using this, what would you say is a natural progression for them to start to use it from a frequency standpoint? Are they using it once a month, once a week, every day? Like, what is a realistic expectation for a teacher that might be feeling overwhelmed, but also might be thinking like, I want to get the best use out of this?
Yeah. I think I always tell educators to start small. Like, you don't have to make your entire lesson into PearDeck for it to be a PearDeck. Like, put 1 or 2 slides to be able to do some check-ins with students, or be able to get some feedback from a prompt, and then go from there and say, okay, well, that went well, or I only had 1 slide in here this time, and that's okay. It didn't take me that much time, but I was able to at least gather some feedback. So I always say, like, do a couple of slides and see how that feels. And if you're not willing to do that in the classroom and put yourself out there and be like, I don't know if I know how this all works, and I don't want to look, dumb in front of my students, which we all do as teachers one day or another. But the ability to even put it in student paced mode and say, okay, I'm going to send home this self-paced PearDeck and see how kids respond and what kind of responses I'm getting in here. So I always let teachers know that you don't have to make an entire presentation PearDeck interactive. Put 1 or 2 slides in there. Even just send 1 slide home where you're just like, please put your comments or please put your feedback from the lesson today. I think just having the ability to see what it can do in a small way will give you the ability to want to continue building those lessons out. And nobody wants to spend all their time making lessons. So 1 or 2 slides that are pre-made and you can just change the text on them will take you maybe 5 minutes. So
that first homework assignment could just be click yes if you get to this. Just to know that they
yeah,
access
exactly.
it
like,
and they
you've done
Yeah.
it.
Are there, and I know using some before, are there any like pre-made pair decks that you heavily suggest using? Like there is an environment where there are some vetted ones that are, you could experience. Are there some that you would suggest a teacher trying, whether it's digital citizenship or like general beginning of the school year lessons that, here are some of the features or many of the features that you can experience so you can see it in action as opposed to just clumsily toggling through?
Yeah. So in the PearDeck sidebar in Google Slides, we have a whole set of generic slides that you can pull from that will be from beginning, during, and end of lesson, critical thinking, social emotional learning, and then different subject specific ones that are on there. Those are going to be more general, but they really do give you a jumping off point of like what you can do with the PearDeck slides. I love the social emotional learning ones because not only are they great check-ins, but they're also like brain breaks, like being able to take a moment to just like pop that into a slide. Maybe you're not doing any content with PearDeck whatsoever. You're just putting in a social emotional learning slide, a check-in slide, a brain break, and being able to have students just interact that way. So not only the social emotional learning slides, there is brain break ones. So you can search them in the peardeck.com orchard that we have there. And they're called brain breaks. I shamelessly made those. And so the brain break ones that we have in there have brain breaks with movement to give you an opportunity to see how can you utilize taking brain breaks and moving in your classroom when maybe you're sitting behind computer screens all day. And then also just brain break slides where they're just kind of doing like a drawing or doing a doodle or here's a line, complete it with a picture. So I think even having the opportunity to just see that PearDeck is not just a content creator, but it's also a brain break, source of information as well. So,
well, and what I like about that, even just that drawing thing that you just mentioned, I've done a lot of. So I'm an instructional coach now for my district, and a lot of the professional development I've done the last 2 years has been about brain breaks, and I love to showcase embedding brain breaks into the instruction because so often, one, it's hard, we forget. Like all of a sudden, it's 42 minutes into a 47-minute lesson, and it's like, oh crap, I forgot to do a brain break, or you don't feel like you want to completely stop quality instruction and learning to do this, like 20 jumping jacks to then go back to it, even though those 20 jumping jacks will be beneficial to the students retaining their attention and their focus. But sometimes we just feel like we don't want to break up this like lesson that is just flowing so nicely. But those planned embedded things, like you said, where it's here's a line, so they're going through slide by slide by slide. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, let's draw this for 20 seconds and then we move on. So there's not that break in instruction. A thing I like to do is if you're doing like 4 corner activities where they're going to different corners, answering different questions, is just throwing a social question. Right. So you have a content question, just throw in some stupid social question where it's like, what do you like to do on weekends? And it's 4 choices. And then you go right back to it. So I love the idea of using PearDeck for brain breaks because it's embedded in the flow of the lesson and it doesn't feel like this isolated event that's going to, screw everything
well,
up.
with the brain break slides as well, I'm going to give you like a little sneak peek. But with the brain break slides with movement, I was very intentional that you could still do content and do brain breaks or do movement. And so one of them talks about how multiple choice like answers and having students pick multiple choice is super mundane. And it's like, you have to pick A, B, C, or D. Instead, why don't you say A is front lunges? B is toe taps on your chair. C is going to be hopping up and down. So you can clearly see the classroom doing these. Do your formative assessment checks. They're getting a brain break, and it's content specific because they're picking their answer based off the movement that they're doing. So now you're getting movement, you're getting content, you're getting all of that together. And so that was what I was very intentional with the brain breaks with movement template, is like you can still do content and you can still give brain breaks and do it wrapped together.
Yeah.
So just some different ways that you can embed
And
that.
one thing, and I know you mentioned this, but the idea of having feedback about all the kids instead of your high flyers or your quick to answer, just echoing that again, because and there is some safety. Like if I have kids sitting right next to each other and I see that someone hit C, I could hit still C, right? Like that is a realistic possibility, but echoing the idea that you have an opportunity in the moment to see the feedback and adjust your instruction is so critical about this, that I will say, and I've mentioned this on previous episodes, like I felt like when I was teaching my first 2 years, I could only see the kids that were like in the middle rows of my class. Like I zoned out from the kids in front and I zoned out from the kids behind. And slowly after time, I felt like I could observe substantially as curriculum got more fluid. But for a new teacher to actually have the answers and make instructional judgment, that is the true power when you can say, I know how all of my kids responded, because that's something that seems like such a obvious, oh, of course I watched and, they all got the same answer. And then you realize that you only called on the same 4 kids. You got the answers quickly, but, did everyone check the box? Not quite.
Yeah, I just want to echo that, Matt, because PearDeck is a fantastic technology tool that allows you to get feedback from every single student. It's not the only strategy. There are non-tech strategies to do as well. But if you are using whole class direct instruction and you are prompting students to answer questions and you are not creating an opportunity and holding every student accountable to respond in some capacity, whether it's the thumbs up, thumbs down, I would say even qualifies, but even that's not great because they can just look around. Like if they are not doing something where they are individually accountable, like answering something on a whiteboard and keeping it hidden until they show or until you circulate the room, using PearDeck, using strategies where the students have to respond. One, you're not all the students are not engaged. And 2, you don't know whether or not they understand what you're teaching. You can't base it on 4 students raising their hand, even if it's 4 different students 3 different times. Like you have to hold students individually accountable. And I know that adds a layer to the level of instruction, but I just want to say, as teachers, you have to make that an expectation for yourself. You cannot say that students are learning if you are not individually holding them accountable. You're teaching, but you don't know if learning is happening.
100%. Yes, exactly. Because that's what happens so often in a classroom, right? Is that those 1 or 2 students that always know the answer and always okay to answer and raise their hand, you get their answer. So you assume that everyone knows what's going on, but you don't realize that that's only a very select few kids that know what's going on. And so how do you make sure that your whole class is growing and not just the 4 that sit at the front and raise their hands every day?
Even if you have 20 out of 25 kids raising their hand, you call on one student, you still don't know what those 19 other students thought and the 5 that didn't raise their hand.
And it gives them the opportunity to do it without fear and not without fright. It's like, okay, I'm not having to like put my hand up when I'm not sure about the answer. You know how that feels when you're a professional development. They're like, I'm going to call on somebody. And I'm like, oh.
Well, even
so
like
now you
that,
have
that
ability.
observation, you want a good observation, so you're calling on those kids are gonna be successful. The one, and I know that we're getting towards the end and want to be respectful of your time, but you mentioned there are multiple question types that are built into PearDeck, and some of the ones that are obvious, like as you mentioned, drawing, which I actually find a little bit challenging to use sometimes. Really productive. I use laptops without mouses, so the trackpads can be a little bit challenging. But in theory, I loved when I first used it. I used it all the time, and then the kids kind of vocalize, hey, we kind of like some other ways, and we'll kind of get to it. Multiple choice is one that is very, very frequently used, and I don't think we need to explain. Can you kind of speak, like, draggable is one of my favorite features, and I believe that's one of the premium features. And essentially, it's kind of like a heat map where they drag where they think something is on an image. Classically, that might be geography. Where do you think this location is? Or, if you're doing anatomy, like what is this body part, or whatever the case may be. What are some of the creative ways that you see some of the more obscure, maybe not obscure, less default question types being used by teachers in PearDecks that they're making?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways, but we do have a text slide, and the text slide sounds like it could just be, boring. It's just text and that you can type on there, but there's actually no character limit. So you could actually do essays in there if you really wanted to, and having kids to be able to go back and be able to keep it all in one place and kind of make edits. You can respond to them, give them feedback. So there is no character limit in the text one. So that's also a really great tool. Multiple choice, most people always see it as just that, but it's actually a great polling tool for your classroom. Being able to poll where students are, seeing what if they are or not in, the level of understanding that you want them at. So great for polling students as well. The website slide, as I've mentioned multiple times, you can embed other websites, gives you a great way to be able to do virtual field trips. I've seen teachers use 360 images in there so that they can now take trips to the Statue of Liberty or wherever it is that they might be teaching students about. And then drawing is really a great one, because I know when you said with the trackpad, it might be sometimes challenging when you're doing some of the drawing there, but actually drawing has not only drawing, it has text functionality, line functions, and highlighting features. So you could literally take screenshots of worksheets, throw it on a slide, put drawing on it. Now they can highlight content. They can be able to navigate and, write in the margin. They're going to be able to draw things on there if they need to. So and even if they have like a fill in the blank kind of worksheet, they can add text boxes and continue adding text boxes. There's no limit to how many text boxes you use to be able to then use it in a way that you can not have to go to the copy machine for these worksheets. You can just pop it onto a slide with PearDeck and be able to put drawing on it. And then with the draggables, I've also seen a lot of teachers that are using it for, like, I used to be an Avid school. I don't know if you know what Avid is, but Avid is the ability to have college and career readiness. And so we used to use this at our school, and it used to be something where you would have students would write in the margin, and they'd be able to, like, put an exclamation point where they found something, exciting, or they put a question mark where they weren't sure about something in an article. So draggables are also great for being able to write in the margin and being able to break down content for students to see where they're having misconceptions or where they're finding things interesting and understanding it. So also draggables isn't just good for geography or anything like that. You can also use it for that more writing prompts as well.
I will tell you what I often would do is I would do specifically math. I would create a drawing slide where they would write often their answers, and then have them go through a text and explain through a traditional typing. And that's what they found as, like, they would draw. It was just one of those things, but you mentioning that there's text embedded, that may solve that problem completely. It just, they love whatever the real estate is. They love filling it with lines. So you can't necessarily like that. It's that same aspect of we've all done 3D printing. The larger the printer could print, the larger they want it to print. So when you're like, oh, it could be this big, but I only made this big.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this, but you can submit pictures. What question type is that in? Where can't they take pictures or screenshots?
So with a drawing slide,
would that be in drawing?
Yeah, you can just take a screenshot of your worksheet and then pop it onto a slide as like the background, and then you just put the drawing slide interactivity, and now they'll be able to do everything they would do with paper pencil, but on a PearDeck drawing slide.
I'm sorry, I mean for students to submit pictures.
Oh, to upload pictures? So that would be with a website slide. They can upload things to different websites, or like Padlets. We use Padlets all the time for things like that. Or if you're doing flips, you can do flips in there and do videos and things like that.
Sorry, I'm going to ask another quick question. So in multiple choice, can you have a picture as an answer as opposed to just text? Like,
you can put a picture on the slide itself and then say A and then the picture, B, and then and then they would be able to just do that as the multiple
Fantastic.
choice. So yeah, you can customize it kind of
Makes
however.
sense.
So Matt, you asked earlier about this, and I can remember 2015, 2016, whenever I would see something that was available, apps and different programs, I would spend hours trying to find the free version that would remotely do the same thing. I remember seeing a quote somewhere that, someone will spend their entire time in line for Starbucks searching for the free version of a $1.99 app, so that when they get to the counter, they're spending $6.50 on a cup of coffee. But I've come to learn that, one, the free versions aren't as good, or they don't exist, and two, I would find free apps, and then 6 months later or the next school year, I go back and the app is dead. Like, it just does not exist anymore. Whereas when you work with a company like PearDeck, they have payrolls. They have people working there. They are making money, so they are improving the program. And I've seen these few programs, PearDeck being one of them, that I used 5, 6, 7 years ago, that continue to improve because it's a legitimate company. And so I would encourage teachers to, like we said, try the free version, try it out, see if it fits your classroom, see if it works, but don't be afraid to invest money. And I'm not encouraging you to invest your own money. I'm encouraging you to use budgets that are available. When I left fifth grade, we, as a team, we really isolated the school supplies that we were purchasing, and we had a common closet that we kept everything, and we we were buying things more on a rotating basis. Like, we didn't need to buy black construction paper every year. We realized we could buy it probably every 3 years because we didn't use all of it once we consolidated it all. And we started using our small classroom, our small grade level budget to pay for programs that we found beneficial. And depending on the school district you're in, that may jive, that may not, especially nowadays. Like in my district, we've done a very good job of really isolating the number of tools that we pay for teachers, so that they can go knee deep on them and they don't feel overwhelmed. And so as a district, we've done that, but we have 7 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and a high school. So we're a somewhat larger district in comparison to some others. Districts in Texas are probably going to say that's non-existent. That's super small. But the point is, like, if you have the ability to spend grade level money, subject area money, some money that your principal has, like, don't be afraid to invest in that, because you're going to be rewarded with a program that is supported and continues to improve. And so I think it's really important for teachers to hear that.
Thank you for saying that. And definitely, I feel like that was how I felt as a teacher. I was like, okay, this is definitely worth it, because there's so many things you can do with one tool. I feel like there's a lot of tools out there that you find that they do one thing and one thing only. And if it doesn't fit into that box, then you don't get to do anything else. But it's like, bring in your other apps that you love, bring in the other documents that you use, be able to use the content that you already have, and be able to just do it with PearDeck.
And even just adding on, Ken and I are both in Pennsylvania. We have IUs, intermediate units, and the IUs often have in their technology department, the districts pay the IU for large contracts. And you'd be surprised that if you were to go to that level, that they can figure out ways to get you memberships either very, very affordably or included in what's already being paid.
Definitely. So I want to wrap up our conversation here for time purposes, Amber, and we are going to hit you with our exit ticket, which is the same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. So I'm going to modify the first question slightly. Other than PearDeck, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
I think being able to have different ways for students to learn. I think that's what technology does a lot of, is being able to give them the ability to draw, being able to type, being able to respond with voice or text. So I think really giving the opportunity to students to be able to learn and be able to present in a way that is best suited to them. So coming up with those different programs that are going to hit the different modalities and learning abilities of students is really critical. And that's a really great way to do that with technology and flipped classrooms.
This could come from your educational experience, your educational support, or just general life. But what is the best piece of advice you've ever received, maybe from a colleague, supervisor, or even a student?
To just build your brand. I think that we all get stuck in the ability to like see, like, think about how we don't look like this person, or we don't function like this person, or we have not those skills or that skills. It's like build your own brand, make yourself unique with the things that you can do and the stuff that you're good at. Innovate with what you have and what you know. I think that I spent a lot of time comparing myself to people and feeling guilty that I didn't have that or this or that understanding. And I realized like I have my own great talents in my own way. So build your own brand, figure out what works for you, and make it in a way that is going to suit the needs of you and your classroom, if that's the case.
I do too. So we all understand that the school year goes in waves of busy and then sometimes crazy busy. It's never like a walk in the park. But what do you feel like educators can or should hear to help them power up through those moments of struggle?
I think look for those small things that are actually working in a classroom, or those small moments that I would notice. Like sometimes you have days where you're dealing with so many students' behaviors and you're just so drained, and you have all these benchmarks you're doing and papers to grade and after school activities that you're like, I can't focus on anything smaller. I can't focus on the small wins that are happening in my classroom. But even just having a student come to class, that and acknowledge you that day because you're not even sure they like you, and you're like, oh, hey, good to see you too. Nice shoes, like being able to have those small wins so that you feel like you're in the right place. You're being validated for what you do and why you're there. Like I said, I still love kids. I miss them dearly. I wish that I was still had the opportunity to be in a school and working with kids, because that you're not a teacher for just the pay, obviously. You do it because you love the kids and you love what you do. And so look for those small wins in your day, because what you're doing is making a difference. Even if it is for one student, they're seeing it.
I love that. It's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates the teachers who are the ones constantly seeking to change, innovate, and adopt new teaching strategies?
The ability to want to learn and grow. I think that we get so set in like, oh, this works for me, I'm going to keep doing it, I'm going to keep doing it. But you realize that kids change, the environment changes, technology changes, school goals and district goals change. So you got to change up your approach. So I think it's having the ability to, I find really great value. And when I was an instructional coach, I found really great value in having other teachers watch the other teachers, like doing peer classroom reviews, saying, hey, there's a teacher that's using technology really well in this classroom. And I would just offer it to them and say, if you'd like to go and check it out during your plan time, or I can watch your class and you can go during that time, I encourage you to go check out other teachers. So definitely see what's happening in your school. Go to other teachers' classrooms and see what they're doing to be able to have ideas that maybe spark your interest, or maybe things you hadn't thought of before. Because I think seeing is believing. You don't always have those ideas on your own, but seeing somebody else do it kind of gives you an idea of maybe that's not so hard. So go to other classrooms in your school, look at your neighbors, check out your teaching colleagues. They're doing great things, I'm sure.
I know Ken said this previously, but on this episode, we have 3 big supporters of PearDeck, and we're not saying that, this is just a product that we all believe in and the quality of it. So as a obvious major supporter of PearDeck, how can our audience follow you, whether that's on the PearDeck side, what PearDeck can offer the audience, et cetera, and continue to learn about this great tool?
Yeah, if you want to stay connected with me, I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Amber PearDeck. So all together, one word, Amber PearDeck. So you can find me there. And then also, if you want to learn more about PearDeck, of course, PearDeck.com is going to give you an option to be able to learn about different things, find different resources and content there. And if you are doing any kind of training with PearDeck, you want to get 90-day free trials, which we're going to give you. And if you want swag to be able to give out, because who doesn't love Perry? There is a website. You would just search it on Google. It's called Share the Pair, PEAR, just like the pair, share the pair. And if you go to that, it will give you the opportunity to get a training deck, a 90-day free trial, some swag, and be able to present PearDeck on our behalf. So check out Share the Pair and at Amber PearDeck on Instagram and Twitter.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amber. This has really been a lot of fun. It was a nice refresher for me. I think it's a good introduction for our audience, or maybe a tool that they've likely seen at some point, and a reminder for them to go check it out. And I just want to reiterate what Matt said about being fans of the program, and it's our goal this school year to try to do a couple of these to highlight important tools that we think are out there for teachers. But Matt and I are only going to ask companies or reps or people that have a program that has a benefit to instruction, because that's what our conversations are about on the show: student relationships, student mental health, and instruction. Like those are the things that are important to us. And so this is a program that definitely supports quality instruction for that student feedback, that student accountability piece. So thank you so much. Continue to share the pair and help it grow, and help teachers feel like they can get a hold of instruction on that side of interaction as well. So Matt, why don't you take us
correcting,
on that?
I don't know if you said it, that you mentioned about a 90-day trial potentially from listening to the episode. I don't know if there's anything to share here, or if it's easier in the show notes.
It's actually going to be a bit.ly code that we'll have to put in the show notes. But if you go to Share the Pair, you can absolutely get one there. Share the Pair will automatically send you an email with the 90-day free trial, the training deck, and the swag. So you can get your individual one there, but we'll also give one for the show as well.
Perfect. So wherever you're watching or listening, scroll down. It's linked. It's linked below there, as well as on our show notes page, which is on our website, poweredu.
All right. So as we power down this episode, Amber, without a doubt, you've left us powered up. Really appreciate the time and what you're doing for education as you spread the joy and true learning to a broader audience. So thank you very much. And with that being said, we will talk to you all next week. Talk to you then.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.